Hey everybody, Mary Z back once again for Voice Hacks. Okay, so today, as promised, I've been hinting that another band was going to send me tracks where I could solo out the vocals. Remember back to my video about Mirath, where we were able to solo out a really cool clean singer in metal, but with like Eastern inflections, so we could really listen to the vocals. The band sent me the tracks, we soloed out the vocals. Well, today I have it for some harsh vocals. So on today's video for Voice Hacks, we are going to react to and analyze the vocals from Cryptopsy. Thanks everybody for joining me once again. I want to thank Matt from Cryptopsy and the band for giving me these tracks. This is so great. I've got the vocals separate from the instrumentals. You can see I've got Pro Tools queued up behind me, all ready to go. So I cannot wait to dive into these. It was super great because I got to talk to the vocalist, Matt, and learn from him about what some of his approaches were, what exactly he was doing on this album. And he's very, very aware of what his vocals are or aren't. So he categorized them pretty much the same way we do, and so he was able to tell me exactly what he's doing. And when I solo out the vocals, I can really hear it. So I want to share that with you and show you some of this cool stuff because we've never been able to do this with a harsh vocalist. So let's take a look. Okay, everybody, we are back over at the Pro Tools here. I've got the tracks loaded in, and we are going to take a look at Matt's vocals. So, a cool couple of things that Matt is doing that is really different from other vocalists. He mentioned that he used to do more fry screaming, and that now he does a mix of a voice with distortion technique that he developed. It has voice and distortion in there.
So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my vocals on the track Sire of Sin. Sire of Sin was the second song that I tracked for the Book of Suffering Tome 2. As it typically happens when I'm doing my vocals, it takes me a few days to really get into the swing of things, and that was the case on this one. I was very happy with my vocal performance on it. As we were tracking it, we just stumbled across a new voice, which I've started using in Cryptopsy a whole lot, especially for the older material. We call it the Chris Bark. It works out really well on all the Lord Worm songs. It's much less of a fry scream and much more of a loud, barking, shout, guttural attack. It is slightly harder to enunciate and to pronounce the words better when using it, but it's a very fun and easy go-to voice that I've discovered and have been using quite a lot. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Check out Cryptopsy. Check out my podcast, Vox and Hops. And thank you, Mary, for checking me out and analyzing me.
He also has a fry scream, a full fry scream that he's using. He said, though, that fry screaming takes him a while to get into, and it's much harder to bring back after long periods of time, and it's easier for him to get into voice with distortion. And I definitely understand why. And the reason is because if you follow me, if you've taken any of my lessons, if you know a lot about fry screaming, it involves our closed chords, and it takes a great deal of compression and effort and strength. And so a lot of times it takes a lot of work to bring out our fries or to even learn them in general. So some folks would prefer to mix the styles for various reasons. So in this case, we're going to be hearing voice with distortion and fry screaming. Now, what's really interesting is when I listened to the stereo track and watched the music video, I didn't really I couldn't hear the difference as well as I can with these soloed tracks. So you're going to be able to hear the difference much more clearly. So keep that in mind when you're listening to professionally mixed vocals and you're trying to figure out what they're doing. You're probably better off looking at a live version, which is why I use a lot of live videos, because in the live, you're going to hear more clearly what the vocalist is doing and you won't hear all the studio processing. In this case, it's not live and it does have some of the studio processing on it, but it's going to be just the vocals. You can tell much more clearly what's going on here. So let's take a look at Matt's vocals. First, we're going to listen to them with the instruments. And already the levels will be different than the original mix, obviously, because these are separated. And now we're sort of taking apart the mix. So I'm going to start a little bit in here. And let's take a look at the vocals. So we'll play a little bit. I'll play and I'll turn the instrument on and off as we go. Here we go.
Listen to king, someone's looking bow. Logiastic prophecies proclaim that I, the video would be the hero pit. Say to God's word, God offended my father's harem. Ian nations, innocent young girls, so weak, unknowly saints. A ritualistic communion.
Okay, so that was really interesting to hear there. So I soloed them out really quick. Let's keep listening to it. Let's listen to a little more unsoloed and see how it sounds. So already I'm hearing the two things that he was telling me about. But again, Matt is a really experienced vocalist who knows what he's doing. He knows that he fries. He knows that he uses voice with distortion. He was able to clearly tell me about that. He also takes care of his voice. He told me that he warms up. He has a set warm-up routine developed by a vocal coach that he uses every day. He didn't just magically make one up. And if you guys want some and you want to warm up for screaming, just go to my Belter series and try those exercises. Those will get you warmed up. I do have a playlist, though, called Warm-Ups for Screamers, in which I did take the singing exercises and put it in there. But let's go back here. I want to go through his soloed vocals, and I want to show you where it's voice with distortion, where we can hear the voice, and where it's fry screaming. Now, the only tracks I have, it is several vocal layers melded together when I solo out the vocals. So in one point earlier, you could hear that there was a fry screaming kind of going on in the background. Just remember, the tracks you're seeing in my window are only a fraction of the actual recorded tracks. Sometimes we have many layers of vocals, sometimes not so much. For me personally, I just don't want to download or have to make someone send me that many files. That's why I just prefer to get the vocals and the instruments as simplified like this, as mixed together. I definitely want you guys to realize there's some layering going on here, and you can do layering too. It's done in all professional recordings pretty much. So it gives you ideas for what you want to do when you're producing records, and we'll be able to talk about that too. So I'm going to just solo out the vocals here. We're going to start at the beginning, and I'm going to tell you what's going on where. There is definitely more voice in these sounds, right? Because we hear like, oh no, no, run away, like a little bit inside the distortion, but it's super distorted. It's very little voice. When I teach people to do voice with distortion, I usually teach them to do 50-50, like 50% distortion, 50% voice. So you don't go too far. But in this case, he's almost to a fry scream, but he's actually more like 75% distortion, maybe 25% voice, maybe even less. Let's listen again, because the difference between a fry scream is making pure noise with overtones versus actually our chords coming together to wave and create a voiced pitch. And here we definitely hear some voiced pitches. It's a cool technique. Let's listen again. I've never heard anybody do this before, and this is really neat, where the person, Matt, is applying the same kind of pitch changing techniques that we would apply to our voiceless screams to his voiced screams. So typically when we do voiced screams, we just change the pitch and say a different note, higher, or lower if we want to, even if we're talking. If it's a voice with distortion, that's pretty easy to do. But when we fry scream, we actually have to change the pitch with our vowels. Highs are longer, lows are rounder. I've actually hearing him do some of this with his voice, where he's doing the voiced stuff, but he's lengthening or rounding the pitches on his voiced things to adjust that 75% distortion along with his voice. And that's really cool. And that's why with the mix, it kind of doesn't sound like it has voice in it. It sounds more like full distortion. But we'll hear that even the fry screams sound different with the mix. But let's listen with the instrumentals. You can hear it sounds a lot less like it has voice in it, or at least it's a lot less obvious. So his techniques are really making this voice with distortion super useful. Yeah, definitely. it blends really well then. So now let's keep going. There was some definite Fry screaming though. There's a huge shift when he shifts to Fry scream. He is also one of these people that's able to go in and out from Fry to voice with distortion. And again, if you've taken lessons with me, you kind of know why that is, that this kind of tissues that we're using on top of them kind of go together. And that's a little more in depth, but let's listen to this next section and hear about Fry and see if we can hear where he switches. I'm going to solo out the vocals right away. So a lot of these were voiced with distortion, and in the background he's doing his Fry. So in the front he's doing something with some voice, and then on the back in another layer he's doing a full Fry. Yeah, you know, on that type of deal. Right here, we hear a classic, what I call low Fry guttural. So a lot of the gutturals we hear from male vocalists are a lot of times low Fry. And I know a lot of you guys think Fry means high and false chord means low, but that is not what it means. False chord, if you go back to my video about the different kinds of distortion, is noise sounds with the chords open, where we flap the false chords and other tissues. And Fry is noise sounds with the chords closed. And each one of those, you can have a high, you can have a mid, and you can have a low. And these deep gutturals that have like a burp that we can go really long for are usually, 99% of the time, there are chords closed, and we're rounding the shape to drive it low. And in a female larynx, where it's kind of small, it doesn't always sound the greatest, so a lot of women will opt to do false chords for their lows. But in this case, it sounds like a Fry to me. Plus, he didn't mention anything about doing false chords. But there's a few things. They have a burp quality to it, and he goes really long. You can't go very long on false chords, so it's kind of a dead giveaway. It's just a closed chord, but with our larynx lowered, so it's kind of like... You know, mine's not as deep as his, but let's listen and let's hear the low Fry. So this is an overtone. This is different from where his voice is in the sound. And you could actually hear there's a few layers in there too. Let's listen to that with the instruments as well to hear how that sounds. It sounds pretty great. So I heard a couple different layers in there. There's at least 2 layers of vocals in there, because you can kind of hear where the waves kind of don't line up, but he's doing the same thing on each layer. In this case, in some places he has different things going on. Some places he has voice with distortion in one layer and Fry simultaneously in another. In this case, they're both low Fry guttural. So here is it again without the music, so you can hear it. And we can even hear like it kind of going into vocal Fry a little bit in some of it. Like in there's a little gurgle sometimes in one of the layers because it's so low. It's such a guttural sound. And then also we hear that the shape, the UR shape is what's, really keeping it low there for him. So it's really cool. This has been really, really great. I'm super grateful to Matt and Cryptopsy for letting me take a look at these vocals. Let's end now by just A-Bing with and without the music as we fade out and see if you can kind of hear where it's more Fry scream and see if you kind of hear where he lets some voice into the sound. And if you guys are confused, watch my screaming series on the YouTube playlist. Go to the Voicehacks main channel page. Watch my screamer series. I explain what I'm talking about a little bit more and what these mean. Fry, false chord, voice with distortion. So you can kind of learn how to do some of these things. And if you can't get it on your own, remember you can always email me at voicehacks@gmail.com for lesson rates on Skype and for scheduling. We're going to end with the rest of this Cryptopsy song.
In some way, some of us are going to be In some way, some of us are gonna be around to see those fuckers burn.